If you're a regular listener of And So She Left, then you've learned from some incredible women who fought hard to do the work they really wanted. Finding those people is kind of our thing. But every once in a while, we hear a story that floors us. One that leaves us scratching our heads, thinking, how the heck did she overcome that? Long after our guest has left the studio. Christelle Biiga's story is one of them. As a young girl in Cameroon, Christelle would often glance at the people walking by her on the street, secretly asking herself, I wonder if that person's happy. The question clung to her, and as she gravitated towards celebrities like Rihanna and Oprah, she would lie down in bed and think about how to leave her own lasting positive impact. It was a simple intention, one that would change the trajectory of her adult life. Naturally, Christelle bought into the American dream. She knew no one in the States, had no family or friends stateside, and could barely speak English at the time. But she still bought a one-way ticket to LAX. What Christelle couldn't know was that the next few years would stretch her resilience, patience, and spirit to their absolute limits. She would find herself coping with stress, trauma, and self-doubt. And she would launch Exposure Maven, her flourishing company that places clients in front of big, relevant podcast audiences to grow their businesses. You're about to hear the incredible story of how Christelle overcame tremendous odds, grabbed hold of her potential, found her own sense of fulfillment, and discovered the joy of life's many uncertainties. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, the podcast about incredible women founders and the wisdom they uncovered beyond the corporate world. It was December when Christelle finally decided to head for the States. At the time, she saw most of the country as a blank slate. So, coming from Cameroon, she chose her destination based on one non-negotiable criterion.
All I knew was that, okay, this is December, so it's the winter time, so it's snowing. But maybe there are states where there is no snow. So I went on Google, type in the search bar, states in the United States where there is no snow. And California was one of them. And I said to myself, well, I think let's go there. Since you want to make that such big impact in the world, what better place than being around Hollywood? Fun.
With her destination carefully considered, Christelle packed her bags and jetted off to LAX. But immediately after landing, she found herself tangled in an altercation with an immigration officer.
So I came in, landed at LAX, thought I had everything, in order, until an immigration officer looked at me in the eyes and said, you know what? I think you came here to work as a prostitute. So you're going back. That was intense. And actually it was December 31st, 2015. I don't forget that date because I remember when they kept us in those cold cells at the airport. They came to pick us up at around midnight to process us before sending us to the detention centers. And they stopped before midnight, to cheer to the new year, to do the countdown together. So as we were standing there with our handcuffs, I had just tears rolling down my cheeks and wondering, is this how I'm entering the new year? So fast forward, I ended up in a detention center where I spent 9 months before winning my case. Now, sometimes people ask me, why did you spend 9 months there? It wasn't a sentence. I didn't have to spend 9 months there. Actually, I could have left at any moment. Could have just signed a deportation paper and go back. Nothing was keeping me there. But that's the time that it took for me to defend myself and win my case. Every time I would go to court before that, we go to court once a month. And each time you go, the judge will ask you one question. Do you have a lawyer? No, I don't have a lawyer. Okay, well, I'll go back and try to get a lawyer. Of course, I had no one here to hire a lawyer for me. So I couldn't hire a lawyer. And the pro bono's lawyer, you had to be really, really lucky to find one.
Yes, and you made a difficult choice because, as you said, no one was holding you here. You could have gone back at any moment. But what was the deciding factor for you to say, it's just better for me to stay and fight?
Two things. The first one was my vision, right? Every time I will want to give up because it was hard, being in jail is not fun. So if the desire to give up was there constantly, especially because I didn't do anything wrong. So it wasn't fair that I was there. I didn't deserve to be there. So the desire to go back was there. But then I will remember why I was here in the first place. And then I will think to myself, this is my only shot to actually make it happen, right? Either if I go back, that's it. There will be no other, opportunity for me to come back, because if you get deported, I don't know how many years it takes for you to be admitted
Right.
again. That was one of the factors that made me stick, even though it was hard, to just remind myself that this is your shot. Is now or never. And the second thing was really the support that I received from other detainees there. Not all of them. I mean, actually, I was the only one that was there for reasons that were strange. The rest were there because they had crossed the border illegally. And I mean, they kind of knew what to expect, but I didn't. So they were there to support me and just encourage me and, give me advice the way they could, let me know, because some of them had been there for like 2 years. So they knew more things than I did. So they were there to really help me navigate all of that. Even though, interestingly enough, one of the things they were telling me was that it's impossible for anyone to win their case there. It never happened. So they were kind of advising me to try to find someone to bail me out or sponsor me and things like that.
Well, that feels like a double injustice. On the one hand, you're being accused of something with no evidence. And on the second hand, you're also being held there with no chance of winning the case. That seems like an
Yeah.
impossible situation.
Yes, it was. And that was interesting that I actually won my case without a lawyer. And
Ah,
that kind of opened the mind of the other detainees, because once I did, people started winning their cases after me.
oh,
So,
wow.
yes.
Wow.
So, yeah, they thought it was impossible because no one had never done it. So sometimes we say things are impossible in life because we have never seen it. Doesn't mean it is actually impossible, right? So that's why I always encourage people to give it a shot. Doesn't matter what the stats say or the
Yeah,
studies
yeah.
say. It doesn't matter. You get a chance to make it happen. Just give it a shot. You never know.
But I love that as soon as you arrived in the country, you created change, even though you weren't aware that you were doing it at the time. But you created a blueprint for the others who were there supporting you and who were even there longer than you. I think that's pretty phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really interesting to see. When I came back from court that day and I told them that I won my case, they didn't believe me. They had to actually
Mhm.
read the court documents to believe that it was true. And sure enough, the next people going to court, they had a different mindset. They didn't go there thinking it's impossible. They went there thinking, well, if she did it, I guess it's doable. And then they started winning. That was really, really interesting to watch.
It's very phenomenal too, this mind shift change when you believe something is possible instead of thinking, oh, this has never happened before, therefore it won't happen in the future. I'm very curious to know about your the process of change for you. You know, like you left something behind to come to America to do something new and exciting and different. And so, at what point did you decide to leave, and how did you make that happen?
Yeah, so I hit a glass ceiling in my country. So I was doing some TV, some radio. I had an event planning company, a small one, wasn't big. Eventually, I felt limited in many ways. And I think many, even the listeners, can relate to that. Sometimes it looks like your life is okay, right? You don't really have much to complain about. It's okay. And some way, somehow within you, you just know that there is more. You just know that this is not it. That's where I was. And I just knew I was meant for more. I couldn't explain it. It didn't make sense. But then I knew it. Your dream or your vision or your purpose in life is within you, and no one can really understand it. Sometimes people struggle with, people don't understand me. I don't have the support of my family, of my friends. So that's where I was at that stage where it looked like my life was okay. And yet I knew something was missing.
It's like a plant that's been in a pot for too long and the roots are just all squished in there and it needs to be transplanted into a bigger pot to thrive and get bigger. And so I think that's where you were at in that moment. And coming to a new country would help you then broaden your message, your perspective, et cetera. And I'm very curious to know what happened after you left the detention center. What happens then?
It wasn't easy because, again, I had no family or friends here when I was coming. And when I first got my visa, I had made a hotel reservation. And of course, after 9 months, none of that was valid anymore.
Right.
So when I was released, they dropped me off in front of the gate at probably 10 p.m. at night. I didn't really know where I was or where to go. But there were people or, organizations that were coming to visit us over there, to support us. So I called one of the people that were coming to visit and I told them, listen, they dropped me off here. I'm not really sure where to go. So they came and picked me up and dropped me off at the shelter. That was another interesting
Oh my goodness.
period of my life, I thought I had left jail. And again, I felt like in another jail, having to shower for 5 minutes. And if not, the water runs out. Can't even wash your hair. I mean, it was an intense situation again, because, I was in a shelter with people that I didn't really feel comfortable being around. But I was grateful at least to have a place to stay until I find a place. So
Right.
eventually I found a place. And then the first job that I got, interestingly enough, was at LAX, the same airport where I was arrested.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
And one thing I can tell you is that the experience in that detention center was so traumatic that I forgot. I blocked it in my brain. So when I went to work at LAX, I had no memory of what had happened there. They would train us to be at different positions at the check-in counters, arrival levels to receive passengers. And one day, they trained me to be at the arrival to take care of passenger system and picking up their bags at the arrival level. And that's when it came back. As I was standing there with passengers, watching them pick up their luggages and exit the airport, it hit me that, oh my gosh, I never actually exited this airport like a passenger. I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it looks like, because I was arrested and taken in a bus and in handcuffs and taken to jail. So standing there and that memory came back, I had my heart racing and I said, I have to do it. After I'm done with, helping the passengers clear their bags, I have to follow them. Even though I didn't have to as an employee at the airport, just to know what it feels like. And then I will go back to the office. When I came out and I saw all the people standing there with flowers or some signs and waving at their families, their friends, and being happy to see them, I had tears in my eyes because I noticed when I came, no one was excited to see me. No one was welcoming like this. I didn't have this. They put me in jail. I didn't have people smiling at me, waving and excited to see me. And I had to take a few minutes to collect myself before going back to the office because, again, no one knew about my story. I wasn't ready to share it. So that was really an interesting experience for me to go back to work there.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm trying not to cry as you're telling me this story. That wonderful, joyful moment of when the doors open and there's someone waiting for you there at the airport, whether it's just a friend or somebody with flowers or whatever. It's such a wonderful connecting moment. And the fact that you didn't have that and it was the complete opposite. You needed to have closure, right? You needed to get through that moment and then feel like a proper free person, not a person that went through the trauma of being detained. How did you then move on from the job that you were at LAX to then starting what you really wanted to do, your passion?
Yes. So as I was working at the airport, I knew it was temporary. That's where vision comes into play. There is someone that says, what's his name? Antonius Wise. He says the key to patience is doing something in the meantime. So I knew where I was going. I knew I didn't come here just to get a job and have a paycheck. I knew I had something bigger that I wanted to achieve. So that was job. I knew from the beginning that it was just a stepping stone. And it was a great job. In less than a year, I became a manager, which had never happened before in the company.
Wow.
That's what HR told me, that she had been with the company for 20 years. That had never happened.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, but that happened. So I did it. And So when I say that I wanted to leave the job to go full time in my business, at the time I started a coaching business, nobody wanted me to leave. But again, I just knew it was time. It wasn't, again, an easy decision because remember, I'm in a country where I don't have a family. Sometimes, people say, well, I started, it didn't work out. I went to my mom's basement. I didn't have that option. Right? For me, it was, if it doesn't work, you're on the streets because I had no one to go to. I'm here by myself. So making the decision to leave a job where I had this big career ahead of me, I was doing great, everybody loved me, to decide to leave all of that and start a business, that was another scary moment. And I remember when I was ready to make that decision, sitting in my apartment and asking, what is wrong with you, Christelle? Why can't you just stick with what you already have? Why do you always go for more? And I was crying, but I knew I had to make it. I had to do it. It was time for me to take the next step, even though it was scary.
Yes.
So I don't know who is listening, what it is to make that kind of decision that don't make sense. As a matter of fact, I didn't even tell my family because I couldn't handle explaining what was unexplainable. So I didn't say anything because I was too scared to have to explain myself. I'd say, this is my decision. This is my life. This is my journey. I have to make it happen. So I quit my job. Actually, they didn't let me quit right away. They gave me a leave of absence. They said, well, how about I give you 3 months, you go set up your business and come back. I said, okay, because I wanted to honor the fact that she was trying. That was end of 2019, November to be exact. So I was supposed to go back to work end of January 2020. I didn't have a client. I said, okay, I have 3 months to get clients and now I have to make a decision. I go back to work, at least have my paycheck, right? Have that. I have rent to pay. And again, in my heart, I just felt I couldn't go back. I wouldn't go back. I remember sending the email to HR to tell her I'm not coming back, crying because I was asking, what are you doing, Christelle? This is crazy. But again, I did it. I sent the email without knowing what I was going to do. The same week, I got my first client as a coach.
My goodness. And it's all happening in like January of 2020, right before
2020.
Things started happening, right? This is just brewing in the background, the pandemic. And now you're making these massive decisions. And so you get your first client and that's exciting. And then what happens?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you notice that it was 2020 when, my decision looked crazy at the end of 2019, 2020, all of a sudden, everything anyway shut down. Anyway, the airport shut down.
Oh, so that's right. That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
so
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, the job was going to be gone anyway, right? So
So you made a right choice.
Sometimes when we're trying to hold on to things that we have no control over, we don't even know what life has in store, right?
Right.
So that's why when your heart is calling you to do something, most likely it's good for you. Might not look that way at the moment, might or sometimes look crazy, but you never know. Just follow the direction.
Exactly.
So yeah, I got my first client and I was excited. I decided to promote what I was doing with speaking and getting on podcasts. I was in a coaching group. I asked a friend of mine who was in the same pod with me, and she had a podcast about fitness. So I asked her, say, hey, I want to get on podcast. Do you have any recommendation? Maybe people that you can refer me to? She said, well, you just got started and you don't even have a website yet. No one will really want to have you on a podcast. So I don't think it's the right time. I remember that they told me that in a detention center that was impossible. And I said to myself, well, you watch me.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think from the detention center, I just know now when someone tells me something is impossible, something just turns off in my brain. It's like, we have to make this happen.
That's right.
Just for the sake of it. So when she said it was impossible, I went ahead and started researching how to make it happen. And then I started reaching out and eventually I started getting booked on podcasts. And that was really, again, a confirmation for me. That's why I always love to remind people that there is no checklist that you need to complete before your next step. Sometimes people come to me and say, well, I don't think I'm ready to be sharing my story on podcasts. I say, why not? and they list me all the things. My message is not really on point. And then I just shake my head. What do you mean your message is not on point? Your story is something that someone needs to hear somewhere. And you're getting in your head right now and telling yourself you're not ready. Says who? Was I ready? Did I get any special training to get on those podcasts? No. Why do those people decided to have me as a guest on their shows? Just because what I told them made sense.
And you also said something about, life happens. We can't wait for it forever. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And sometimes, I find myself saying a lot of times, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's when the best stuff happens, because when you don't know what you're doing, sometimes that's when there's space for creativity and there's space for new things to arise. And so being too prepared, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to leave room for spontaneity. I'm very curious to know about, when you were younger, you were a young girl and you had these questions about whether or not people were happy. What compels you now to help strangers be happy and find that happiness?
Well, I would say it's a selfish desire to just make my little girl happy. Yes, because just to, go back to how I was saying how I was getting on podcasts in 2020, April or May 2020, I found myself sharing that story for the first time, the story that I didn't want to talk about, that I wanted to forget. And maybe the listeners can relate to this. Sometimes something happens to you and you carry shame around it, even though you didn't do anything wrong, right? Sometimes, some people go through abuse. It's not their fault, but some way, somehow they carry shame around it. And that's where I was. I didn't do anything wrong. Actually, I checked all the boxes. I got my visa. I came here legally. And some way, somehow I was put in a detention center just like I came here illegally. So I had shame around it because there was a story of you were in jail. If people know you were in jail, what would they think about you? I didn't want people to know. And I wasn't talking about it. When I was going on podcasts, I was just talking about my coaching, how I help people, and the mindset and the courage and all the things. And during that podcast, I found myself telling that story. And at the end of that interview, the host couldn't believe what he had just heard. And the feedback that I got from that interview blew my mind. And I realized that, okay, this is actually one way that I can help complete strangers be happy, because people were encouraged.
What feedback did you get precisely?
They felt encouraged. I was receiving messages from people saying, thank you. I was really confused and, I didn't know what to do. But now after listening to you, I just feel I have to figure it out. I just feel like I have to figure it out, because if you were able to go through that and you are still here, I have no reason to give up on this.
You said something about the key to patience is to do something in the meantime, which means that if things aren't happening right now and you still have to wait a little bit, stay busy, I guess. Keep doing what you need to do. Just in your case, you learned English and you did all these things. What advice would you give people who are maybe in a similar situation or looking to change something in their lives?
Whatever stage we are in our lives, we have plans, things that we want to see happen, things that we want to make happen. The truth is that they will not happen right away. And there is a reason for that. Maybe the things that we want now, we can't really receive them now. We are not ready for them. What does that mean? For example, when I was coming here, I had that big vision to come and make a difference. But I wasn't ready because I couldn't even speak English. So whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, you need preparation. You might think, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm excited. I want this. I will do whatever it takes. Yes, you will do whatever it takes, but life also will prepare you to be ready. And that's why you have to do something in the meantime, because if you don't, you will get discouraged. If you sit around waiting for it to happen, you will get discouraged because you might think it's not happening. Maybe I should, change my vision or change my goal. No, that's not what it is. Do something in the meantime, because everything that you will do in the meantime will prepare you to become the person that is capable of holding the vision that you have, the person capable of holding the goal that you want to achieve. So that's why it's so important to not sit around just keeping the eye on the prize and saying it has to happen. When is it happening? Because again, you have no control over timing. you don't have control over life in general. And that's something that is important for us to really understand as human beings. And that's why we're so worried when we think, oh my gosh, things are uncertain. I heard that word so many times. And my question is, when has life been certain? When?
That's
Life
a great question. It's never.
When? Because not all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, we're living on certain times. When has life ever been certain?
Yes, yes.
And then when things don't go your way, you start freaking out because you had that illusion, or you were living that delusional life that, oh, you have control. No, you don't. So that's why you have no control over when your vision is going to come to life. You might have the best plan on paper. It doesn't matter. Life will happen. And for you, not to slow you down, not to break you down, not to discourage you, but to prepare you. If they had told me, we're giving you a visa, but once you're going to get there, you will have to spend 9 months in jail, I would say, okay, hold on. I don't want your visa. I would have thought I can never survive a day in jail.
And yet you did
and guess
it.
what?
Yeah.
I spent 9 months in jail. Because we don't know, we don't give ourselves enough credit. We don't know what we are capable of. That's why life gives us those opportunities to discover who we really are, how strong and powerful we truly are.
Yes, and everyone's story is important. It doesn't matter if they don't think it is. It is important. It shapes who they are and it shapes their decision making. And all the personal experiences culminate into becoming a great entrepreneur. I really believe that.
Entrepreneurs are special people. For you to go through all the things that we mentioned, be brave, stick to it when things get hard, you have to have a special heart. You have to really have it in you to helping people. You have to really care about making a difference. That's why you will put yourself and allow yourself to go through all of those things. Hopefully, at the end of this interview, even one person will feel encouraged to not give up and maybe believe more in themselves.
Yes.
And maybe know that their story matters. And that's what I want for all the experts that work with us to know that what they do matter and can actually make a difference in the world.
Thank you so much to Christelle Biiga. You can learn more about Exposure Maven through the links in the episode description. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve current listeners and reach new ones. You can also fill out our quick feedback form. It's just 5 questions long, and your response helps us to make the show that you want to hear. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. Cansulta connects entrepreneurs and leaders with a global roster of over 150 pre-vetted consultants and experts like Ethan and I, who can help organizations in any business area, from HR to finance to sales and operations, and even branding and podcasting. We'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Our music is by Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment. You can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.